Wanted to check really quick at first on some of those injuries, Johnny Mundt status, and then other guys who may not have come up in our press conference yesterday.
Yeah. So, Johnny Mundt, really unfortunate. He tore his ACL. He's going to be out for the year. That's a big loss for us. He's done such a great job, but he'll come back. He'll attack the rehab the right way. So we'll put him on IR. Jake Funk also tore his hamstring, which we'll recommend surgery for him. He'll be on IR and be out for the remainder of the year. So it's a bummer for both of those guys. Sonny had banged his shoulder up a little bit, but he should be okay. John got his neck banged up a little bit. John Walford on the one zone read. He should be okay. And then other than that, it's just your kind of typical bumps and bruises. But main thing is really, it's a bummer for both Johnny and Jake. Two losses on guys that have really, done a nice job continuing to improve. And, we'll have to ask some guys to step up in those two players' absences.
I'm not sure if this question has one answer or even a simple one, but when you build something and when you create something as you guys collectively have as a staff, this offensive system that you run, and you collaborate with someone such as Matthew on it, where do you see specifics of when somebody has ownership of that, but not just ownership of it, but sort of a confidence within it and sort of can do things above what is being asked of him within that system?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think really the best way to articulate it is there's phases of our offense. And when we activate those phases, where is there opportunities for ownership to be expressed? In the run game, for example, we have certain things if we're trying to run the football that, there might be some looks that a defense can present that he checks us out of and gives us to another run. Like I always look at for the quarterbacks, right? And I know this is kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, Jordan, but, you got to be able to call the play. You got to be able to understand the intent of the play. You got to know the mechanics that you're asked to operate within that play and then be able to really solve the problems. And I think that fourth thing is where the real ownership, the collaboration comes in. So it's the play, it's the intent, it's the mechanics, and then it's being able to solve the problems. He's able to do that. And a lot of those problems are reflective of, protection oriented in the pass game, certain run structures or pressures or different defensive surfaces that give you problems based on the amount of guys you have committed to the blocking surface in the run game. Those are the majority of the problems that arise. There's certainly some coverage problems that you might have a dead play, but I think it's really whatever the phase of our offense is that we're activating. But specifically for Matthew, I think he's got great ownership of all of it. I think he can really solve a lot of the problems. But I think in the instances where you're saying, okay, hey, let's get into certain things, and then you've got a menu of things that you can activate, where it's kind of like a dealer's choice and you're putting it in his hands is where I think the ownership is really displayed. And there were some instances yesterday where, he's definitely full control, getting us in and out of the right looks and the right plays, a couple of which resulted in touchdown plays. And then some of it might just be the ownership of getting all the way through a progression when you're starting front side, or it might be we're running a keeper game and how to no-look a slide route from Cooper Kupp that keeps Logan Ryan tucked in on Tyler Higbee and opens it up for a touchdown. That's putting his own spin on it, but all of those are different forms of reflection of the ownership that he's displayed. And he truly is an extension of the coaching staff on the field. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing is a reflection of things that he owns. And it always starts with the quarterback. It always will. And that's what he's done. And that's why I think you see us operate in the way that we are in a lot of instances. And the positive thing that I think you can feel is I still think there's room for improvement for us.
And one more, I had asked you about this months ago in the spring in terms of what you feel you might learn from what happens when a play starts to go out of structure and what he can do when he maybe freestyle is not the right word, maybe it is, when he starts to freestyle a little bit, and about you sort of letting go in that circumstance and trusting him in that. What's that process been for you, and where are you now versus where you were?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, to me, those are situations where, as coaches, right, there's always a timing, a rhythm that you want to see reflected. Now, that's not how the game's always played. It's an imperfect game. And if you can have those situations reveal itself in a manner that's reflective of, all right, when we're on rhythm, when we're on schedule, let it come to life. But I also think one of the beauties of a player like Matthew and some of these other quarterbacks is giving them, where you're distributing the field in a manner that's reflective of, okay, if the rush disperses that makes you get flushed, is the field still distributed and can he activate all parts of the field? But I think the best way that I would answer that question, Jordan, is it's easy because what happens is if I'm wrong, he still has a chance of making it right. And those are the things you're looking for. If it's there in the timing and rhythm, let's be as close to automatic as possible. But I think the guys that really separate themselves are the ones when it does go a little bit off schedule, all right, you have the ability to make it right. And there's different ways that that's illustrated. I mean, I'm thinking about the Thursday night game. Tom Brady gets flushed off his spot and he's still kind of in the integrity of the pocket, gets moved to his right, hits Antonio Brown on an in-breaking, kind of with a push and an in-breaking route coming in behind it. That's a great example of an off-schedule play, or you see guys that actually break contain and end up making big plays down the field. And so a lot of it can be illustrated in different forms or fashions. And I think Matthew's done both of those in the first 6 weeks that we've been together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gary?
But it's easy to let go when he does those things, if not to minimize that part of the question too.
Hey, Sean, with Jared Goff coming back this week to play the Rams, do you have any, on reflection, any regrets about the way that trade went down from a communication standpoint, or do you have any regrets about how that was handled?
Oh yeah, I think if you said, do I think that the way that it unfolded was totally different than anybody anticipated? Yes. Could I have handled it better in terms of, hey, if there's a possibility of it, let's get ahead, even if you're out of town, yada, yada, yada. So to answer your question, Gary, yes, I wish that there was better, clear communication. You don't want to catch guys off guard. It came together a lot faster than anybody anticipated. But yeah, of course, I think that anytime that tough decisions and things like that, where people are affected, you always want to be as understanding, as empathetic as possible. Think about it through the other person's lens. And there's certainly things that, I know I would do it a little bit differently if I, when those situations arise in the future. But I think Jared knows the respect that I have for him. I feel very good about the dialogue that we were able to have, before he had gone to Detroit. He knows the appreciation that we as an organization, that I have as a coach, for all the good things that he did here. But to say that it was perfectly handled on my end, I wouldn't be totally accurate in that. But I'll never claim to be perfect, but I will try to learn from some things that I can do better. And I think that was one of them, without a doubt.
After that deal was made, and I know it was just in the first few days, he told Sam Farmer, if you're in a place that you're not wanted and they want to move on, then the feeling's mutual. You don't want to be in a place. It became increasingly clear that was the case. What do you think he meant by that?
All right. I can't speak for him, so I think I'd be speaking out of turn. That'd be a question for him, not for me.
But was there a tipping point for you, though, I guess, in terms of when you decided, you needed someone else to get you guys to where you wanted to go?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think going back to when this all went down, it was more about the opportunity to acquire Matthew and what we felt like that meant for our football team. And that was why that decision was made. And that's why things came together as quickly as they did, because it felt like it was a rare opportunity to acquire a player of Matthew's caliber, that those opportunities just don't come up often. The studying and the evaluation of his game, and then kind of that organic interaction that was able to occur in Cabo. It was kind of a very unique situation, to say the least. And that's what led to the decision being made in the manner and the timing that it was.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin?
Hey, Sean.
Kev.
With Goff coming back to LA this week, given all of those circumstances, some of what you just talked about, but just the idea of a guy coming back to play where he used to play, for you as a coach, is there anything fun about this? Is it uncomfortable? Is it distracting? How would you describe it?
I mean, this to me, I mean, this is such a small network of things. I mean, there's a lot of games where you go against former players or people that you've worked with, or you're coaching against people. And so I think the appreciation you have for the NFL and what a competitive balance there is with 32 teams and players and coaches alike. I think I feel fortunate that these are things that occur on a regular basis. I think there's going to be a lot made of it because he's a quarterback and it's such a significant position and all the good things that he had done for us and for this team and, the success that he had. But it's about the Lions versus the Rams. And we're going to try to put together a great game plan to be successful in all three phases, try to go get our 6th win. And that's really what it is. I think it's a fun narrative. And these are questions that you guys have to ask, but there might be some inside knowledge that he has on how we operate and vice versa for some of the things that he can do. But that's no different than any other week when you have some familiarity with an opponent, whether it be from the coaches or from the players that you've worked with in previous stops.
Mm-hmm. Goff and the Lions are 0-6. They were getting booed yesterday. Are you deep enough into studying them to be able to tell us how representative 0-6 is or isn't?
I wouldn't say that I'm deep enough in that preparation. As you guys know, usually the start of the preparation kind of is followed up after we finish up this, and the earlier parts of the day are kind of wrapping up and putting a bow on the Giants game. But I've followed just because I follow the league. And so I know this, I know it might not have gone the way they wanted against the Bengals, but I see a Ravens team playing as good as anybody in the league right now. And I know they went toe to toe with them. And there are a couple crazy plays at the end from that being a win. I think Minnesota is one of the better 3-3 teams that I've ever seen when I've seen just some of the stuff that they're doing. And you look at the way that it's unfolded and they're a play away from winning that game. So our guys know that the record is not reflective of the type of caliber of opponent that we have coming in here. And we're not going to, we're going to be ready to go. And we know we need to be ready to go to be able to try to get the result that we want this week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dick.
Hey, Coach. Yesterday you talked about just the defense and how pleased you were with the defense. But Taylor Rapp specifically, obviously he's been battling injury the last couple of years. But what have you seen different out of Taylor Rapp this season and enabled him to be successful yesterday against the Giants?
Well, I think the make a difference plays that he had chances to deliver on, he did, Nick. I thought he did a great job, displaying a lot of versatility, playing in the deep part of the field, a lot of things where he was in the underneath parts. Thought our coaches put together a great game plan. He ends up having, those 2 interceptions. He was active in the run game. Thought he did a great job communicating. And I thought as a defense as a whole, really there's 4 turnovers, but I also count 4th down stops as a turnover. So you really look at it as our defense had 5 turnovers, and 3 of those we were able to turn into touchdowns. So you're getting 21 points off of those turnovers. That's good complimentary football. But Taylor Rapp was outstanding, Nick. Really pleased with him. I've seen him play confident. I've seen a guy that's just using his experience and applying it in the right ways. And then I'm seeing 10 other guys play well around him. That's always the reflection of good team ball. And I thought yesterday was an outstanding example of Russian coverage working in alignment, different personnel groupings that we were able to activate to utilize the totality of the amount of guys that we had up defensively. And, Taylor was certainly a big part of why things went as well as they did yesterday. And I'm expecting him to be able to build on that performance, but that was great and really happy for Taylor.
Each week obviously presents a different challenge, but from a standpoint, from a coach's standpoint, obviously, what areas do you feel like you've been able to coach, and in what areas do you feel like you've been able to teach and able to get everybody on one accord and on being on the same page? Yeah,
it's a good one. I think the first thing is coaching and teaching to me are one and the same, Nick. I think it's always about, how do we all come together? How do we see things through the same lens? I've heard Raheem say this before, and it's our job as coaches to identify the problems, and then ultimately the player's job to be able to, have those solutions and put those into effect. And I think it's a combination of both. Identify the problems, help put in place the solution-oriented answers, and then let's go execute it as players. And so I think the guys really, just understanding, all right, how do we put a game plan together that's in alignment with trying to stop some of the things that offenses are trying to do based on the situation, the down and distance, some of the personnel groupings and formations and all the different things that go into that. But, I could go on and on about it, but I think it's ultimately about everybody collaborating and connecting to see it, through the same lens, and then understanding what needs to be done, that clarity that's communicated from our end. What do we need to do to execute at the highest level and ultimately have our process in alignment with getting good results?
Thanks, Coach.
You got it, Nick.
Stu.
Hey, Sean, just to circle back on Johnny and Jake for a second, what is your outlook on those positions right now? What's your preliminary thought on who might step up and fill each of their respective roles?
Yeah, we're working through that right now. I know that somebody's going to need to step up at the tight end spot and the running back spot. A couple guys that are candidates, on the practice squad or maybe even on the active roster already. So those are things that we're in the process of working through. Just kind of got that information on those guys too. So that'll be something that I'll probably be able to give you a little bit better clarity on Wednesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kalen.
Hey, Sean, thanks for taking the time.
Sure.
Looking back through, since you've been there in 2017, you had Alec Ogletree, Corey Littleton in 2018. Those were the two guys that I noticed were the green dot. And then you shipped in 2019 where it looked like it was Eric Weddle, last year, John Johnson, this year, Jordan Fuller. So I was curious, what is your process in determining who is, the play call relayer on defense?
Yeah. So, these are things that we've talked about a lot. And I think the first thing that goes into it is the most natural position is that inside linebacker spot, just because of the proximity that you're aligned to the front and the back end to be able to just get things communicated. That's always the ideal thing. But there's so many different personnel groupings that you're mixing and matching throughout the course of the game. And when you look at Weddle, there was a lot of instances where you knew he was going to be on the field every single snap. And he was such a great, rare communicator that we wanted to be able to take advantage of either or. And so that was kind of the start of having somebody from the back end take over the mic. And Eric was a really unique, special player in his own right to be able to do that. John Johnson, in a very similar manner, great communicator, great ownership and autonomy. There was a lot of defensive personnel groupings that we were playing that enabled him to kind of be on the second level of the defense. So he was able to kind of seamlessly communicate. And then really with Jordan, another guy that he learned from JJ, he's a great communicator. He's not quite as involved on the second level of the defense, maybe as those other two were in previous years, but his communication. And then really what it boils down to is he's on the grass every single snap. And so some of the, we play a lot of those inside linebackers. Kenny's playing a lot of snaps, but you see Troy Reeder. We've mixed Ernest Jones in there as well. And so what it really boils down to is it's a credit to Jordan's great communication and the fact that he's on the grass every snap.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Lindsay.
Hey, Sean, I know there's a lot of focus on Jared coming back here, but for Matthew, this is his first time ever playing against his former team in 13 seasons. Is that something that you'll talk to him about going into this week as far as just how to maybe handle some of that kind of extra, I don't know if it's pressure or how he would describe it, but just the extra sense of what it's like to go against a former team like that?
Yeah, I think you talk to him about it. I don't know. He's so impressive in terms of his weekly rhythm and his consistency through these first 6 weeks. And he's so steady and even keeled. I don't think he'll make it bigger than what it is. But again, that's something that you want to ask and get some insight on how you're feeling. Even as we go through their personnel, defensively, offensively, it's amazing the amount of changes that have been made specifically on the defensive side of the ball, but there's still a lot of changes, a lot of new faces offensively. Anytime that you have a new GM, new head coach kind of transitioning. And so I think there's a lot of guys that maybe he wouldn't recognize. And maybe it'd be even a little bit different if you're going back to Detroit as opposed to them coming out here. But I think that's definitely something that you'll talk about. But I don't get the sense just knowing him that he'll make it anything bigger than what it is. But you're not minimizing the history. And I know how much he cares about a lot of people and a lot of great memories that he created there.
I'm curious, as a head coach, when you have spent several years with a player and you're facing them in an upcoming game, is there ever an instance where you text them or call them before during the week, or is that communication really reserved for maybe pregame or postgame?
I think it just depends on, whatever that relationship is. I was really close with Kirk Cousins as well. And that happened to be the second game that we played when I was out here in LA. And so I think what you do is I think there's a mutual respect and appreciation that exists. But with players, I don't think you want to maybe bother them the week of, but I kind of just do what's natural. I don't really think too much about it. I don't think you want to make it a bigger deal. It's definitely not awkward. I mean, it's such a frequent occurrence going against, former players or former coaches, like I alluded to. I think about, as you're asking that question, like with Matt LaFleur, because of our close relationship, that was a different dynamic. We talk on a weekly basis. So we weren't going to change that up. Now, we weren't talking about the plays that we were going to run. Maybe I should have got him to tell me a little bit more information last year, but I think it's all predicated on the individual circumstance and situation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
We'll wrap up with Gary, then Jordan.
Hey, Sean, just circling back to Jared, I'm just wondering, is there a moment or situation that stands out in your mind as the best moment that you guys spent as a coach and quarterback? And secondly, how do you think he'll be received at SoFi Stadium on Sunday?
Yeah. So I think it'll be received well. I think the LA fans and I think the Rams fans know what a great job he had done and how much, I think how much he meant to the Rams organization, both as a football player and then also the community. I mean, you look at all the great things that he did off the field and finished some projects that he had started with some of the schools and things like that. I think that tells you a lot about the human being that he is. So I think he'll be received well. I don't see it going any other way than that. Some of the memories, there's a lot of good memories, Gary. Remember my first year being able to win that division, with the rest of the guys celebrating in the Tennessee locker room after we were able to do that, celebrating in the Lions locker room the second year when we were able to win the division. The Thursday night game was a pretty special performance against the Vikings. Him being able to demonstrate a great performance in crunch time against the Saints in the NFC Championship. So there's a lot of good memories that come to mind. And I think that's where the further you get away from, even though it was a tough circumstance and not an ideal way to kind of have him go to the Lions and things like that, I think the further that things go on, the more you can reflect back in a positive way of all the good things that occurred over those 4 years that we were together.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Jordan.
Just wanted to touch base real quick on some of the rotations you guys did in your secondary yesterday. What day is it? Yeah, yesterday. And Dante Dion, he played a hell of a lot and seemed pretty sticky. So what did he show you? Not just what he did in practice to earn that, but then also some of the versatility that it seems like you guys were utilizing him in.
Yeah, just that, Jordan. I thought you talk about, talking about Matthew, how smart he is. Double D is a really smart, instinctual player, great competitor. He did a great job being able to play outside. He played some inside, played over 50 snaps for us, and was a heavy contributor in a big way. And I thought he did a great job. Definitely wasn't too big for him. Came up and made some tackles as an enforcer in some of the run fits. And he did a really good job. I was really pleased with him. It's good to be able to get Nick Scott a little bit more involved. Burgess played, I want to say, around 9 snaps. So I think the more that we can take advantage of it, I think Rochelle continues to take steps in the right direction. David Long got a couple snaps as well. And so I think really maximizing the ability. And then I also thought it was Jordan Fuller's best game this season. He's been such a steady performer that you almost take him for granted, but I thought he moved around. I thought he had some great underneath fits in the run game where you felt his presence. I thought he did a great job playing in the deep part of the field. Great job with the communication, recognizing some of the things that we felt like they were going to try to get to in their pass game based on some of those situations, some of the things that we had shown. And so Double D was great, Jordan. I was really pleased with him. But I also was really pleased with the secondary as a whole. And, Jalen continues to make his presence felt. That was an unbelievable play on the screen. And then he looked pretty swaggy with the celebration afterwards.